terror and threats and all sorts of things. It's also a wonderful world and fantastic. A dear friend of mine, Dan Ackerman, wrote a beautiful book called The Human Age, which I urge you all to get if you want to think about larger issues of our planet. And also Mary Piper's book, The Green Book. Both those books are great books for adolescents that are interested in climate issues and where our place in the world. But for adolescents, they're facing a whole new world. So they need the courage to do that. Okay, that's the reason. You need courage. So emotional spark is a passion. Social engagement is the connection. Novelty seeking is the courage. And what's CE? CE is creative exploration. Creative exploration. Why does nature need adolescents to push against the status quo? What is the purpose of that? Yeah, the world. Think about it this way. And adolescents, listen in or watch this response. How many of you as adults have experienced that you went through childhood, you're a generalist, you go through adolescence, you find out what you love to do, you finish high school perhaps, maybe you go to college, maybe you don't, but you start getting a job, taking responsibility, and now you're working hard, your particular niche that you've carved out for yourself, and when you come home at the end of a workday, how do you feel? Tired. You're very tired. You just want to put on TV and have someone give you a massage, give you a bath. Right? We're tired. Now, think about it this way. We, each as adults, have gone from being a generalist to a specialist through adolescence. That's basically what adolescence is about at this moment. But what we did was we adapted to a world that was there at that time. Now, when you then found your niche and you found your job, does the world stop changing? No. So for our species to be as adaptive as we are, and we are, in fact, for good or for bad, the most adaptive species on the planet. We can live in any climate, we can do all sorts of things to this planet, and I'm not saying it's good, but we do it, and we adapt. I'll have you think of it. Because of the creative exploration of adolescence. They're pushing against the status quo. Every culture that we studied in our Center for Culture, Brain, and Development that we used to have at UCLA found, every culture we could look at found that adolescents everywhere had two things. Starting to associate with peers more than parents, and pushing against the status quo. Sometimes it was in subtle ways, like the adults in this culture, they weave from the bottom to the top. Well, darn it, I'm an adolescent, I'm going to go from the top to the bottom. I'm laying my claim right here. That's good. Right? So they're going to try something in a new way. Nature needs that imagination is what creative exploration is. Imagine a world that could be rather than just adapting to the old world it used to be. If you think about the major innovations in art, in music, in science, and as you know, in technology, it comes from adolescent minds. Adolescents have the emotional spark, the passion, the social engagement for actually collaboration, the novelty seeking for courage, and the creative exploration for imagination to imagine a new world and go after it. So the reason when we started, I said that the hope for humanity on this planet is adolescence is because of this essence. We have gotten ourselves into a very, very bad place. I do a lot of work with climatologists and people in climate change issues, and they're trying like mad to figure out how to reverse what's going on. But they're just using adult brains to do it. We need the essence of adolescence. We need the passion, collaboration. Right? We need the courage, the imagination of the adolescents to save this world. And I don't mean to put pressure on you adolescents who are in the room. So let's change it. Forget the save part. Let's just say serve. Let's say serve the world. So when you think about what we do, because we don't want to say, hey, save the world, then, I'm not going to do anything, I'm just going to listen to music. But when you think about serving the world, so I want to edit that out. We want to really think that adolescents can have a reframe in how they're working this out. Now, before I come to the conclusion of the talk, and then we'll have time for discussion, let me just point out what the remodeling brain is actually doing. So, the brain itself, if you take our hand model, is comprised of about 100 billion neurons, and each neuron has an average of 10,000 connections to other neurons. That's synapses, the synaptic connection. And if you think about the first 12 years of life, you're just basically growing more and more synaptic connections and soaking things in like a sponge. One would imagine that would continue on, plateau out, and albeit, but everyone was surprised when they found at UCLA, at our institution, and at the National Institute of Mental Health and other places after that what was happening in the brain was completely different from what people thought. Number one, instead of continuing to accumulate more and more synapses, you started to remove the synapses that were established, and even remove some neurons. And that's called pruning, like in a garden, pruning away some of the leaves and some of the branches of a tree to shape it. And then as the pruning goes on in the first part of adolescence, it continues, another process will begin about middle of adolescence, which is called myelin formation. And what myelin, M-Y-E-L-I-N, myelin, sometimes called myelination, is the creation of myelin. What myelin does is, here are two neurons. If I lay down myelin between these two, it basically makes them more connected. And more meaning that 3,000 times faster their communication. And in the brain, timing is everything. So that if you're a myelinated circuit, you can do stuff that a non-myelinated circuit couldn't even dream of doing. So when you watch the Olympics, you say, oh my God, I couldn't do that. You're right. You haven't laid down the myelin that you laid down with the skill building. So when we teach in the Mindsight book, in the Brainstorm book, these Mindsight skills, we're teaching to lay down myelin in ways that allow you to develop this internal compass. Okay? So the remodeling of the adolescent brain has two elements, pruning and myelin formation. The pruning allows for the brain to become specialized. And it's based on a number of things, but one of them that's easy to remember is use it or lose it. So with our kids, we told them, because they were both very resistant to music, especially our son, we said, before you hit your 12th birthday, before you become a teenager, you have to do a musical instrument. Because the brain is ready to learn foreign languages, it's ready to learn musical instruments, it's ready to learn athletics, all sorts of things. The pre-adolescent brain is ready to soak in. So for our son who's now a musician, music is like a second language to him. It's just what he is, And if he hadn't done that, he probably would have lost that capacity to do that. Now, when you think of it as use it or lose it thing, you realize, well, how can I do everything? Well, you can't do everything. And this is the whole purpose of adolescence in many ways, is to become specialized. What's the specialization? You're pruning away circuits you're not using. And you're going to increase the connection among the circuits you're going to retain. That's the remodeling of adolescence. And the reason we say adolescence doesn't end when you turn 20 is that this myelination continues throughout the brain well past, even past 24, but it's just a good thing to remember, 12 to 24. But it goes past that period. Now, it may be if we were in Papua New Guinea and we studied the brains of people living there where they assume responsibility at 17 and 18, it could be myelination stops then. Lauren Steinberg's work suggests, in fact, that that's true. And the reason I said keep your adolescence going is because you want to keep this myelination happening. You want to keep your brain developing these skills. So, let's do just a brief review of the essence for all of us who are adults. And this can either be about yourself, if you're willing to raise your hand about it, or about people you know. So, how many of you know people either close to living in your body or who, since they've become an adult, have lost much of, if not all of, their passion of the emotional spark? And who have lost the importance of friends and social connection and collaboration, who have stopped trying new things and keep on doing the same old, novelty seeking, they don't do it, and who are not pushing the boundaries of their knowledge and skills by creatively exploring new things. Raise your hand. So here's the amazing thing. A lot of adults I know have lost many of the elements of essence. And here's a couple of facts just to know. When you look at a study of how the brain changes in response to experience, which is called neuroplasticity, what we know for adults is that our brains continue to grow throughout the lifespan. Throughout the lifespan, they grow. And if you had to pick 4 general factors to keep your brain growing in a healthy way throughout your adult life, guess what they would be? Keep passion in your life with an emotional spark. Keep your friends near and dear, close to you, with social engagement. Try new stuff. Don't do the same old, including how you walk around the block. Have novelty seeking, have that courage. And push the boundaries of your knowledge with creative exploration. Those would be the 4 general principles that research shows will keep your brain young. And the other thing, when I realized this, I was writing this out, I said, oh my God, this is actually a book for adults. It's been miscast, you know? And then I realized, as I was teaching in one high school about this stuff, before the book came out, I said to these high school kids, I said, how do you think you would feel if you were an adult and you had this adolescent living at home who had this passion and these friends and this courage and this imagination, and you had lost all those things? And that kid reminded you of what you lost. How would that make you feel? They go, jealous. And then I started realizing in my practice that a lot of the adults that I was seeing were the parents of these adolescents were really pissed off at these adolescents, probably because they were jealous. Seriously. And what's been amazing about the Brainstorm book is that when people read it, when the adults read it, they realize it's never too late to reclaim your adolescence. And people start feeling this vitality just reading the book, adults. And for the adolescents, what it does, and this is some of the quotes I said in the forward paperback, these statements that they make are, I thought I was going nuts, but now I realize I'm going sane. And I can actually do something, because neuroplasticity can be guided by the mind. When you read a book and it informs you and teaches you skills, it can transform you. It can transform the way you use your mind, which is a process different from the brain, but dependent on the brain in many ways. The mind is a process that helps regulate energy and information flow. When you use your mind to guide energy and information flow through your nervous system in specific ways that promote something called integration, a linkage of differentiated parts, you actually can take the chaos and rigidity that sometimes fill any of our lives, but fill an adolescent's life, at moments when they're not integrated, and you can produce and cultivate and nurture integration. Now, what blew my mind as an interpersonal neurobiology person was, I was reading all these independent studies of the brain's remodeling in adolescents. So imagine how I felt, having written for years that integration is the basis of health, that our relationships that are supportive of each other cultivate integration in the brain, that, when you impair integration, you lead to chaos or rigidity, and you can actually look at every single psychiatric disorder the symptoms being either chaos or rigidity, and every study so far that's looked at the brain of people with psychiatric disorders has revealed impaired integration. So imagine how I felt when I'm reading all this stuff about adolescent brain remodeling, and then a number of studies say the following sentences, essentially. The purpose of the pruning and the myelin formation during adolescence is to create a more integrated brain. That is the power and purpose of adolescence. To go from a generalist to differentiating regions and special skills, and then linking them, which is integration, so that what the outcome is a highly functioning, contributing person to society who's happy and feels connected to other people. That's the power and purpose. Now you can say, well, but what about all these risks? And there's no question about it. When you look at the essence of adolescence, let's say the novelty seeking and the hyper-rational behavior that's driven by this dopamine shift and shifts in the limbic area, there's no question about it. I don't want to scare anybody, but it's worth just saying statistics. Even though adolescents have a stronger immune system and a stronger physique than at any time in their life, this period between 12 and 24, the body is stronger than at any other time. They are 3 times as likely to have a permanent damage to their body or die from preventable causes. So it's a serious, risky time. So for the adolescents in the room, when your parents are going, oh my God, I'm nervous, they're nervous for a reason. The research supports that. This is a dangerous time of life. That's one true risk. So why not teach adolescents to develop an internal compass so they can combat the hyper-rational thinking and the dopamine shifts? Now, another risk that happens besides that kind of dangerous physical behavior, with dopamine shifts, what's another thing that leads to dopamine secretion? Drugs. Drugs and anything that's addictive. That's right, video games included. So if you are going to become addicted to something, it is most likely to happen between 12 and 24 years of age because of this dopamine shift. This makes you incredibly prone to entraining your brain to have this big dopamine hit from alcohol, from cocaine, from games, all sorts of things. So what we want to do is inform adolescents about that. Now, not to prevent it from happening. And there's a difference between drug use, drug abuse, and drug addiction. Those are all very complicated issues. But at least adolescents should be informed that these are processes that are very active in them. Like, for example, even smoking. And so we banned smoking advertisements for adolescents. Now, what did they show could help reduce adolescents from starting smoking? Well, they thought, let's scare them. They put up these pictures of these black lungs, and they said, look what's going to happen to you if you smoke. And do you think that affected adolescent smoking? For adults to put up a picture like that? No. So does anyone know what campaign worked?
Truth. They leveraged their rebellion.
They leveraged their rebellion. Remember how?
Yeah, truth campaign. Acting like adults are lying to us.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what they did. They said, you know what these adults, how they're lying to you? These adults have figured out how to get you addicted and make them really rich by taking your money and making you sick. And then the adolescents stopped. It was brilliant. And it was the truth. I mean, it is the truth, actually. It's totally intentional. So the point of all that is that we can understand these risks of danger, of drug addiction. The other thing we really need to say is that this pruning process is a tricky business for anyone at risk. And at risk people can be people with genetic vulnerability, for example, who've inherited a risk for schizophrenia or for manic depressive illness, or if you've had a history of abuse. So let me walk you through a little bit of how to do the thinking psychiatrically about that. So either a genetic vulnerability or a developmental trauma can lead to a reduction in certain of the fibers in the brain that are called integrated fibers. So let's just do the story of bipolar disorder. So in the brain, what Hillary Bloomberg at Yale University showed was that if you look at right behind your forehead, this area here, the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, for clinicians in the room, sends inhibitory fibers to the amygdala below it. So you can see even in your hand model how close these middle two fingernails are. Look, this lateral fingernail sits on top of the amygdala. It sends these inhibitory fibers that basically tell the amygdala, chill out. Either with GABA, for example, gamma-aminobutyric acid. So here's what Hillary Bloomberg found. That people with manic depressive illness have too few fibers going from the prefrontal cortex to the amygdala. So what happens is the amygdala can get firing off, and instead of this area shutting it down, the firing off the amygdala can shut off the prefrontal cortex, and then it explodes. And that is what, in part, can be related to mood cycling. Okay? It can happen to any of us, for example, even without this risk, where you flip your lid. For any of you who read Parenting from the Inside Out, know you as an adult, or anybody, you just flip your lid, the prefrontal cortex stops working, this lower area is just firing all over the place, and you, as an adult, can do all sorts of things to your children or your adolescent that you don't intend to do. And in each one of my parenting books, I always put in something about how I flip my lid and how I have to make a repair afterwards. And when I've had my kids read those entries to make sure they're accurate, my son read it and he said, I guess when that one came out, he was 14 times, he was a little bit older, he was 16 times when it came out. He said, this isn't accurate. He goes, but what's wrong with you? Why would you want to publicize this? You look like such a jerk. I said, well, I just want to, good. I said, I want to demonstrate that even if you write books about these things, you can still flip your lid. And the important thing is making you repair. So that's true of anyone. But if you with bipolar disorder, the prefrontal region is not able to contain the lower areas. That's the thought. So let me walk you through some of the reasoning. Let's assume that in a 5-year-old, the number of fibers from the prefrontal cortex to the amygdala, this is just theoretical numbers, hypotheticals. So let's assume for this prefrontal cortex to control the amygdala, you need 500 fibers. Let's just do that. Okay? So let's say you start with, in a typically developing person, you have 3,000. So you can regulate yourself fine. But let's say you're someone who's genetically vulnerable and you have 900. Okay, so you're okay before you're an adolescent. Now adolescence hits, and let's say everybody, just for numbers' sake, is going to reduce those fibers by 50%. The pruning process. So you're a typically developing kid, and you go from 3,000 to what? 1,500. Are you still okay with regulating your mood? Yeah. So all you need is 500. But let's say you started at 900. Now what do you do? 450. What did you need for it to work? 500. You can't control your emotions. You can't control your mood. Now, your mood starts flipping out all the time. You secrete a lot of cortisol. The stress of your own mood dysregulation secretes the stress hormone, which is neurotoxic. Prolonged stress and elevated cortisol levels kills neural connections and sometimes even neurons. So now you go from 450, and your own internal system is going to bring you to 300 and 200, and pretty soon you are wrecked. So Kiki Chang at Stanford University and David Miklovitz at UCLA with adults are trying out using mindfulness meditation for people who either have manic depressive illness or were at risk of developing it. So in Stanford's case, it's the developmental thing, because they feel that with medication or without medication may be able to change the natural evolution by stopping the pruning process, by stabilizing the mood with meditation. And in David's case, these are people with established bipolar disorder, and to take someone off medications with that serious disorder is a serious moment, but you need to come off those medications if you're trying to get pregnant. So for ethical reasons, what he's working with is women who want to get pregnant, who have manic depressive illness, teaching them to do mindfulness meditation. Studies complete it again. So we'll have to see what the results show, but the idea is you can use the mind with mindfulness training to grow fibers in the brain. And that's known. Now we want to use these special populations and target that growth. So I say this because my feeling in writing the Brainstorm book is, why shouldn't every adolescent be given those same tools to deal with the stress of adolescence? You know, there's so much hype here, you know, I don't know how it is here in Boulder, but in Los Angeles, this is what happens. You're in the oatmeal house, fine. Then you got to get into the great preschool. Because you know, if you don't get in that great preschool, it's very unlikely to get that great elementary school. And if you don't get into the great elementary school, which you really want to get into, and if you're in it, you got to get into the great middle school, which has attached to it a fabulous school. Because you want to get into the most amazing college, so you can get into the most rigorous graveyard you can. And I say this with research backing me up, but parents always get angry about it. It's really important to develop your education and get further education for sure. But the studies that compare where you go to college and the outcome in life, your happiness, your financial success, your contribution to society, zero correlation. So why parents are so flipped out about which college their kid goes to? You want them to go to get further education. If your kid's not a college kid, fine. But if they are, fine. But where they go should be matched to where they're going to actually realize their fullest potential. And, you know, that is completely true. And when you develop a child's internal compass so that they move into adolescence, developing the best of their emotional spark, their social engagement, their novelty seeking, their creative exploration, you know something, you could help actually them to find this internal compass so they go out when they launch. You know, what we do as parents is we become launching pads. In the beginning, we're like a safe harbor, and that's beautiful, and we continue to be throughout life. But then soon we become like a launching pad. They go off to camp, you know, they go away for long sleepovers, and they go away to college. And, you know, in the Brainstorm book, I talk about what it was like. Our son was already away, and then our daughter was going away, and I'm busy typing this book, and she's like in the hallway with all those bags packed, and I can hardly see, and, you know, all this stuff. And I said, oh, you want to spend the morning together? She goes, no, I have some friends coming over, and there's like 8 friends over to say goodbye to her and stuff. Why didn't she want to be with me, you know? And, so we have to deal with our own, you know, pain about that, and that's our own inner work. So what I want to leave you with is that there's incredible hope when there are some schools that are kind of Brainstorm-based schools. So one school I consult with in New York is called the Blue School, and what we're doing there is forming an entire new middle school based on the principles of the essence of adolescence. Because think about how this would look. Think about if you develop a school where instead of emotional passion being interpreted as pathology, you realized it was vitality. And you started to harness that. And you say, well, how would you do that? So here's a proposal I'll just throw out. This is a general consideration that we're thinking of doing at Blue School and other schools that are coming up all around the country. It goes like this. You say, okay, you say to an adolescent, you're entering middle school. You are no longer a child. You are an adolescent. And wherever you are, your development, your physical development, this is a different period of time. So rather than just tell you exactly what we're gonna do, you know, like we're the adults who know, you know that's not really true. You know? So rather than just being a teacher who mandates stuff to you, of course you need your reading, writing, arithmetic, and all these facts and stuff, but we're here as a consultant. So we want you to pick. Here are 10 of the world's major problems, right? Food shortage, climate change, violence, racism, you know, poverty differentials, all these things you can list. Say, pick which of those 10 you feel in your body. So you're developing an internal compass, awareness of bodily sensation. You say, pick which one of these that really grabs you. And for a month, you're going to follow that passion. The social engagement part is you're going to collaborate with your peers, because actually adolescence and all of humanity is really based on collaboration. And yet what do we usually do in classic middle school, high school? Encourage severe, destructive competition. There's constructive competition for sure, but we encourage this destructive one. You know, keep it to yourself, do all that. This. We want to encourage collaboration, right? So that's the social engagement. Novelty seeking. We say, hey, you've gone through 6 years of school already, you know how to do that stuff. Now it's problem-based learning, and we are going to figure out this problem. So that if you feel like being competitive, great. Let the competition be against the world's problem, so that when you win, everybody benefits. That's the kind of world we want to create. It's a world filled with empathic joy, where you are really proud of another person's success, rather than feel threatened by it. And as we nurture this novelty seeking, this new way, the creative explorations, we say, look, you know this is pushing against the status quo that adolescents need to do. So rather than thinking, oh, there's something wrong with this rebellious adolescent, oh, this stupid adolescent, you know, instead of taking that usual adult stance, we realize this is our hope for the future. This is our hope for the future. So we say, your imagination, we're going to nurture. We're not just going to give you some standardized test that says there's a right and wrong and you better know which one it is so you get into that fancy whatever. This is about the future of the planet. And together, you can use your collective imagination to figure it out in ways that we as adults have not figured out. And when I say to the adolescents at the end of the book, and the adult reading the book, which, you know, I was meeting with another group today, and this was the central focus of our talk. We've done something very odd in modern life that is so built into our culture that we don't often see it. Like a fish swimming in an aquarium that doesn't even know it's in its water. And that is, we've said that the self lives in your body only. And the correlate there with modern science is we say that the mind, which gives rise